Our meeting tonight. For all of you who are joining us via live streaming, we're glad you can be with us tonight. I'll call the meeting to order, and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Good effort. I'd like a motion to move into an open session of the Long Range Planning Committee. And I'm looking for hands out there. Okay, Mrs. Nardolillo.
So moved.
All right, and a second, Mrs. Pangburn. All in favor? All right, thank you very much. I just want to mention that our long-range chairs are Mrs. Paula Durazio and Mr. Sam Johnson. And Mr. Johnson will be joining us shortly. He is teaching a class tonight. And so I will now ask Mr. Cora, who is going to start us off with long-range planning?
Well, yes, we're going to present the changes that we are proposing here in the plan for the Loudonville edition. And just like to preface this, that we have spoken with Mrs. North, our principal, Mrs. Dopp, our school nurse, and our art supervisor, Mrs. Ann Manzola. These are the folks who are most directly impacted in the school building by this. I think we have a solution that will suit everyone quite well, but for the time being, I would like to turn it over to our friends from CS Arch, Dan Woodside and Mike Andrews, to frame the issues for us and talk specifically about what the proposal is. And please know that we as an administrative team endorse this recommendation and certainly present it for your review and consideration.
Thanks, Joe. I think Mike's gonna take the lead on going through the synopsis and going through the different options for us, and I will jump in as well. Mike, you ready to go?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much for finding time for us tonight on the schedule. It's nice to be in front of you. What we're talking about today is an issue that's arisen at Loudonville Elementary School. The original project, when it was designed, we programmed the spaces in the building with the principal, Miss Flynn, at the time. We were going to put an addition for the nurse's office adjacent to the one-story addition to the building that was built in the early 90s. The intention was to move the nurse out of her current location so we could renovate those spaces on the first floor to create a bigger art room on the first floor. What we were confronted with when excavation for that addition started at Loudonville was we found an existing fuel storage tank. The fuel storage tank is 15,000 gallons, which is approximately 10 feet in diameter by about 25 feet long. It's a very large tank. After the tank was discovered, we did research and were able to confirm that the tank was noted on the DEC website as a closed in place tank, which means everything from a DEC standpoint to date was done that needed to be done as part of a capital project in 1997. What they did was they removed any contents of the tank at that time. They cleaned the tank out. They provided flowable fill in the tank, which is basically concrete, so no contaminants can get back in the tank. And then they sealed it off and closed it in place, which is allowable. So there isn't technically anything that would need to be done with the tank above and beyond what was done in 1997 at this point. If we were to proceed with the addition in this location, we would have to remove the tank to install the new foundation walls. So we're in a situation currently where the top of the tank is about 6 feet below grade. The tank is 10 feet deep. Between the two-story addition on the cafeteria side and the one-story addition, we have to dig a pit over 16 feet deep by 25. So it makes supporting the existing building a very precarious and expensive idea to have to do that. The other thing that we would have to tackle on the environmental side is if we decided to remove the tank itself, we would have to have DEC involved to do everything per current code and regulation. We would be required to test the original soil that's found under the tank. If at any point since 1953, when that tank was installed, there were ever any sort of petroleum leak below that tank, the district would be required to mitigate it and remove that soil. Mm-hmm. So it's unfortunately a large unknown that could add cost and magnitude to the project if the tank was removed. So we've gone through a process working with stakeholders in the building and the district at looking at different options of how to proceed with the addition is where we started. When we looked at how to achieve the work and continue with the addition design, we met with geotechnical engineers and different structural engineers that led us to helical piles as the design solution as the best way to provide support for the existing foundation walls of your building. What that process entails is it literally is a large corkscrew that is it's drilled into the ground. It remains in place forever. Boards are attached to it that would support the existing subbasin soil that are below your existing building. That would allow us to safely dig out the pit to remove the tank and then to build back up. There's a lot of cost with a system like that. We ended up with helical piles as the design solution through consultation with geotechnical and structural engineers, because the majority of other options for shoring design, which is what this would be to support your existing building, involve driving piles. And there isn't really enough area to literally, you drive huge stakes with a weight on the top into the ground. So it literally is a driven pile. It vibrates the building. It's not a great location for that application. What we have done since reviewing those options for keeping the addition was we looked at the existing building and we had conversations with Principal North to see if there were opportunities to renovate portions of the building, portions of the existing building to meet the program needs of the district and to still achieve all of the program spaces without building the addition. Abby was very great to work with. Everyone in the district has been great to work with in solving this problem. So what we'd like to show you today is what we would recommend proceeding with in lieu of building the addition. Dan, is there anything that you wanted to, was there anything
Not at this time, Mike, you can continue
Okay.
now.
I'd be happy to answer any questions you have now or after the presentation. Please let me know.
If you're gonna, Mike, if you're gonna go into the drawings, the only thing I would say to the board, which I have shared with the administration also, is the question has arisen about why we didn't know that this tank was there. And I wish I had a really good answer for you, except I don't. We were involved, CS Arch, Collins and Scoville at the time, was involved with the project back in 1997. I did not remember that tank was involved. If I had, there's no way that we would have designed this addition as part of the pre-referendum process this time around. I just wish we had a better answer for you than that. We were not involved in the original design of that addition. That was a different firm back in the late 80s and early 90s. But we certainly were involved in 1997 and just did not uncover that information to help inform this design.
So our goal tonight is to talk through the process, to talk through recommendations. What we would like to do is to provide any answers to any questions you have either tonight or between now and the board meeting that's scheduled for the 21st. To see if we can come to agreement on the solution being acceptable to the district. So I'm going to move into some of the graphics, just to bring your memories back, because it's been a while since we've talked about some of these elementary schools. What we're doing at Loudonville is We're moving the main entry of the building to the 1991 addition. So your main entry and secure vestibule and principal's office suite becomes the room that's currently the music room in the building, or was the music room in the building. I'm not sure what it's used for in 2020. With that switchover, this is the addition I'm talking about that was intended for the nurse. This space, you can see my cursor, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So the space the cursor's over is the existing cafeteria. This is the 2-story portion of the building. This is the 1-story addition that was built in the late 80s, early 90s. This is a blow up to show what we intended to provide in the nurse's office. So there was a waiting area, which would have space for a desk and chairs. We had a refrigerator, base cabinets with a sink. We had an accessible toilet room, a storage closet, a space for 2 cots with cubicle curtains, and an exam room, which would have casework, a sink, and a cot. The space was intended to be air conditioned, and it would have all new finishes, seeing it was an addition. The addition square footage for the nurse was approximately 600 square feet. This is just a site plan to show you that the tank is pretty much where it's shown there in green. This is the existing 2-story portion of the original building. This is that glass hallway that leads you to the 1-story addition. So that's the general area where we have the tank. This is to show you where the tank was discovered when excavation was started. This is kind of the round corner. This is the top on one side of the tank, which heads this direction. And again, that's about 6 feet below grade at finished floor. What we did was, when the issue was first discovered and school was ready to open back up, we completely fenced off the area so that students couldn't get in, no one could get in or around the area. There were no operable windows or exits that opened into it, so we were able to contain it. If you went on site today, what you would see is it's been backfilled and finished, because it's important now that we're into winter and frost season. We don't want exposed foundations like where the cursor is showing on these parts of the building. We don't want that exposed to the elements. If the ground below that freezes and thaws, it could move and cause cracking. So everything right now, until we know what we want to do for the final solution, until we get into the spring and the ground thaws, we want to be sure that everything that's here is protected so no damage is done to your existing structure. What we intended to do in the project was, just for reference, this is where the existing main entry of your building is. The main office is right to the side. The principal's office is on the left side of the main entry. If you go down the hallway, this was the existing nurse's office, and it consisted of a waiting room, a toilet room, another area that's labeled nurse with a sink, a small closet, and an exam room. We had a general classroom, which is this room 12 in the front of it. We were going to gut renovate both of these spaces in the project and open up the wall between the 2 spaces to make one larger art room, which you see in this slide. So the art room was intended to be, I think it was 1,100 square feet was the size of the space that the art room would be. We would provide the sinks, new casework, and countertops in what used to be the nurse's office. So that's what was intended when we originally programmed the space with Ms. Manzella. What we're recommending we do instead, because the addition is very difficult to construct at this point, we're looking to renovate the existing nurse's office. And the new nurse's office in the renovated space would be about 400 square feet. So it is a little bit smaller than the addition, but we've been able to provide for an accessible toilet room. We still have a small closet. We still have a separate exam room with a sink and a cot. We have 2 cots with cubicle curtains in the main area. We would have base cabinets, wall cabinets, and a refrigerator. We still have the desk and a waiting area. This space would have all new finishes. The space would have air conditioning provided. That is a requirement. It would have new flooring. It would be a brand new space, except we would keep the existing windows. Pretty much everything else in the space would be brand new. The room that was intended to be art here, what Ms. North brought up as a great idea was using that as a special ed classroom, which was intended to be on a second floor classroom. Moving that downstairs to this space, we would provide air conditioning in this space. And it would be on the first floor, close to the nurse and closer to the main office, which is relocated to the existing addition. What we would do upstairs is we would leave the art classroom, which is currently about 1,050 square feet, this space right here. We would keep it the art room. We would paint the room. We would provide new lighting and a new ceiling, but pretty much that's it. The art program would stay in the space it's been in for a number of years. We did meet with Ms. Manzella and Ms. North today, this morning, and everyone was in good spirits about staying in that space. They actually like that space.
And Mike, I think it's important to add too, it's as big, if not slightly bigger by about 40 or 50 square feet than the proposed new addition renovated art room.
The new addition would only have been 50 square feet bigger. So she still has an above average size space.
Isn't the existing art room bigger than this one? I thought the new one was 1010 and this one is about 1040 or 1050.
You are correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Correct, Jeff, or Dr. Core. The other space that we're looking at, this room was intended to be the special ed resource room on the original design that we did. This space would now be first grade classroom. So the other first grade classroom is here. So there would be a separation between the two first floor classrooms, but the principal didn't see that being a tremendous issue on the second floor. This classroom is smaller than the other first grade classroom. It's approximately 750 square feet. This classroom was intended to be special ed. So in the summer of 2020, just this past summer, the new mechanical system was provided in this space. This classroom has the benefit of actually having air conditioning because now it's going to be used by first grade, but that system was already installed as these decisions were going on. So it's a smaller room. It has the benefit of air conditioning, which the other first grade classroom wouldn't have. It also has the potential of, we're talking about potentially making this existing storage closet dedicated to that classroom. So it's a smaller classroom, but storage that's seasonal, storage that isn't needed on a weekly or monthly basis. That teacher would have a place to privately store it outside of the room right down the hallway. Brad or Kevin, if you're on the line, would you like to talk about schedule impacts of either option?
Sure, Mike, thank you. Basically, the original bid for this addition was to start in the summer of 2020. And due to the logistics of your parking lot and your front bus loop, we went into a pause during the school year. Then we resumed construction the following summer for completion. So that had us starting this summer and then wrapping up next summer to start the school year. Proceeding with the addition and the tank removals, we did a little comparison on the timelines to procure all the contracts, schedule the work, start the work, and complete the work. And basically, with the school year, we really couldn't in earnest start the work until the summer of 21. Following the same schedules that we originally had to build this addition, and due to logistics, again, we would need 2 summers to finish the work, and that would move out the project into the end of August of 23. So you can see that there's a real time frame disconnect here with if we did go after removing the tank. That might look to be as if that we could complete all this work in the allotted time frame that we originally planned, which would be starting the interior renovations this summer and wrapping them up at the end of the summer. There would be additional cost savings, I believe, in the renovation work, and we did a little comparison there as well. On the left, we showed you the exposure if we went after the addition of the tank with the additional time involved, the shoring operations, which Mike talked about, as well as additional inspections, potential second shift work, and exposure there in the event we did find additional hazardous materials. We associated some costs with that. And there would be additional general conditions for the contractors. And also there would be additional CM services required to stay on the project for a couple more years. So you can see that number is rather hefty. Worst case scenario. Now, if we deleted the addition, went back to the renovation, there's going to be some cost savings to you. We will be able to get a credit back for not doing the addition. Some materials have been procured, but not the majority of them. So we ran through and did some numbers. As you can see, for the site work, we estimated approximately 35,000 credit. The art room renovation, 33,140. The addition work, 239, for a total estimate of 308. Now, there will be some additional expenses incurred to do the renovations as Mike described. And right now we ballpark that without a construction documents of roughly 85,000. So that would net you a savings of roughly $222,000. Any questions on that?
Thank you. Are there board questions for construction management or for our design team?
I have a question. I was just curious, is there any room left on that lot to expand later on, or will we have to deal with this if we want to add something to that school in the future?
It's a great question.
Dan, do you want to take it, or do you want me?
Yeah,
to?
I think my answer to that would be we're pretty limited in where we can go without affecting the playground over by the other addition that we completed previously, the media center addition. There's certainly room up on top of the hill. It's difficult to connect that though. We might be able to go straight back from the 91 addition. That affects the parking loop paving out there. So it isn't great. I mean, we don't have a lot of real estate there that's really that good to really deal with.
Dan,
we had a single floor addition. Could we build a second floor on top of that, or is that not structurally made for that either?
Yeah, we'd have to look at that and see. There's always that possibility. I mean, it's a structural solution. There are ways to do that. We've done that in the past. The biggest issue you run into there is just your ongoing operations. So building over top of something that is potentially occupied, you can imagine how challenging that is. So it'd have to be scheduled, accordingly. But yes, you can potentially do that, but it certainly comes with its own set of challenges.
This was also a school, Ron, during design of this capital project that went to it too deep. So this wasn't a campus that I don't know if long-term the district saw tremendous growth on this site, because it is limited. The site is limited for the amount of building you already have on it, with parking lots on both sides. Anything you built, you would lose parking, and there's not a lot on that site to begin with.
Right.
It's really like it's like an urban site, even if it's not as urban as you might think.
The existing art room, did that have a sink in it? I couldn't tell from the drawing.
It has, I believe, 2 sinks in it
Yeah.
in the back corner. It wasn't shown on the drawing, but there are 2 sinks there. And in speaking with Miss Manzella this morning, she thought that the count was appropriate for the room. She didn't request we add more.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Do the first grade classrooms have bathrooms?
The first grade classrooms do not, no.
Mm-mm.
And there's a bathroom nearby?
There's a bathroom right down the hall. There are 2 bathrooms right now that have stalls in them that are used as the 4th grade bathrooms. And Miss North thought that they were intended to be 4th grade bathrooms, but there's no reason they couldn't be shared bathrooms. There's a boys' bathroom and a girls' with multiple fixtures and toilet partitions.
Okay.
I have a question about the art room. Are there any renovations taking place in the art room? I thought you mentioned there were some things that had to be changed in the art room.
That's correct. What we're going to do is we're going to leave the flooring and we're going to leave the existing casework and sinks. We're going to refresh the walls by brightening them up and painting them and refreshing them. And that room has it may not be original, but it has older lighting and a ceiling. So we are going to take the scope, which was the lighting, ceiling, and painting that we intended to do in the art room on the 1st floor, and move that upstairs. So that's neither a cost savings or an increase in cost. We're just going to put ceiling and lights in a different room than we intended. We also talked to Ms. Manzella about looking at different furniture options if she was interested or needed a few other pieces of furniture for art storage needs. But we didn't want to get into a lot of built-in casework in the room.
Right. Thank
Because
you.
it just takes up a lot more floor space.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad we're considering leaving that tank alone, because that could open up a host of other problems.
And we really don't like precarious and expensive. Those are 2
Exactly.
words we, make us a little edgy. And so I think that you've come up with a good design, a really good, a good option for us.
Yes, I agree.
Way to make lemonade out of lemons. So good choice.
It's
Good.
unfortunate. It's unfortunate that we can't proceed, or it's very risky.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, right. And as you say, the staff seems to be happy with this plan, right? The administrators are happy and the teachers are happy. And so I think that's a good sign as well. Really looks like a good plan.
What we discussed with Principal North is if the board was able to make a determination, say on the 21st or whenever you're ready to make the determination, first thing in the new year, we would meet with them, all the stakeholders. We would reprogram their spaces to be sure they're going to get exactly what they want and what is budgeted for in the renovated spaces, so that they're not lacking anything that they need. That would start place in January of the new year, 21, and we would be under construction this summer, and they would move into the new spaces in September of 21. And there is time to do that.
Mhm.
Sounds good. I think we could be ready by December 21st, Joe. So.
Mhm.
So any other questions you have, please feel free to forward them. We will get you prompt responses.
If you would like to forward them to me, I can forward them to our design team or to our management team or to Brian Kraft. We can get answers.
Okay, if there are no more questions, thank you very much, Mike and Dan and Brad and anybody else out there. Kevin, I don't know, Kevin's not here. And oh yeah, Larry too. Thank you very much
Thank
you.
for your efforts.
Have a good night.
Yeah, great.
You're welcome.
Good night. Take care.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Happy holidays.
You too.
Two.
Take care.
Okay, I'd like a motion to enter into a special session. Mrs. Pangburn, a second. Mr. Durazio, and then no questions or comments, all in favor. Thank you very much. And Mr. Kaur, would you like to begin?
Yes, I would. And Jane, if you could begin screen sharing here. You have been presented with an MOU. This MOU would be with Albany County. We really would be our site supervisor if we decide to use the rapid test. to test our children should we go into a yellow, orange, or red zone. So I think what I'd like to do is start with presentation here. Certainly, Ms. Giles, feel free at any point in time to add to this. Absolutely. And Mr. Stein as well, who is working with our nurses on this, is here on this call as well. So just to give you some background here, the governor has a initiative to target the spread of coronavirus. And so zones and the areas around them have been divided into 3 categories. A red zone is the cluster. That's where a focus area is put into contain a spread from a specific defined geographic area. It's very granular. It can be down to a zip code. For example, 12110, Latham could be placed on that if it hits certain criteria, i.e. Goes above 5% spread of a 7-day average over 10 continuous days. An orange zone is a warning zone. Currently, it's defined by 4% or more. Although, again, I would want to preface everything I say tonight with the fact that this is a very fluid situation and it's changing. So this could change very rapidly. One might argue that, we already have passed yellow and we are in orange in most of Albany County, and yet these zones have not been prescribed for Albany County or any of the surrounding areas. So I preface that with the fact that this is a changing circumstance, and we are following the lead of the New York State Department of Health and the governor's office on this right now. So an orange zone is an area put in place primarily densely populated urban areas, and it's a buffer zone around a red zone cluster, microcluster. So in New York City and in the New York metropolitan area, you might see some specifically designed red zones and orange zones that exist around them, or in the western part of the state, or in central New York, in Rochester and Buffalo in the west, and in certain parts of central New York around Syracuse, you might see red zones surrounded by orange. And a yellow zone is a precautionary zone. It's as a larger area, could be in effect a county, is moving to above a certain level. It's been defined as 3% or more, 7-day rolling average over 10 consecutive days. Quite frankly, Albany County has surpassed this, yet we have not been assigned this designation yet. These are the different zones. These different zones carry different requirements with regards to testing children in schools. And there are additional metrics that have been established by the New York State Department of Health. One metric that is becoming increasingly important is the availability of hospital beds, the availability of ICU beds, the number of patients who have been placed in intensive care and the like, because that is obviously a very critical metric when you take a look at the overall strain of COVID-19 on the health system. So these are the zones. These zones all carry requirements for testing should a county or a region or a zip code or even more specific area than that be assigned either yellow, orange, or red. And so in essence, these are what we are currently planning for. And this is why the county MOU is in front of you for your consideration here. Jen, we can move to the next slide. So the state and the governor's office has essentially recognized that keeping pre-K through grade 12 in school is important. It's critical to student success and parental stability. State has, and the governor has committed to allowing schools to remain open. The caveat to that is the school's infection rate must be under control and must remain under the infection rate of the community at large. and that's particularly true for younger students pre-K to grade 8. So that's the emphasized area that the governor has stressed. So in fact, right now, schools have reported nearly 500,000 test results of students, faculty and staff since September. There have been 13,000 on-site positive cases. That positivity rate is 2.6. The state is currently hovering around 5%. This slide shows as of December 7, that is Monday. These are the numbers of hospitalizations in New York State. You can see that number is sharply going up here. We are, again, 5% was rather low. We are actually pushing 6% now. We are at 5.74% daily positive rate in the state as of December 7th. And, if you take a look at in just a month, that's gone from 2.4 on the 7th of November to 5.7 on December 7th. I want to thank Ms. Skeels for putting together these great graphics and this data here. Look at the increase in hospitalizations within the state. As of December 7th, nearly 5,000, 4,835, and that compares with just 1,396 on November 7th. 74 fatalities on December 7th compared to 18 fatalities on November 1st. So we were always warned by public health officials that there would be a second surge. We are in that second surge, probably entering into the first week of the surge post-Thanksgiving. Albany County yesterday had 205 positive cases. That was the first time they cracked 200. Today they were above 180. So the number of cases within the county are increasing substantially. We can go to the next slide. And again, just as we stated here, 205 new cases on December 7th. That compares with just 55 cases on November 7th, 88 hospitalized on December 7th, and 31 hospitalized on November 7th. So, we have some rather stunning data here. If you take a look at, the time period from April 26th to November 8th, we had a net gain of 2,998, over 3,000 cases in 6 months. In 1 month, we had slightly over 3,000. So again, this is what we are dealing with locally. We are dealing with as a state, and those graphs are telling a very concerning story right now. So the governor back in October established these zones. And so basically the zones were established in tiers. There were 4 tiers. I think many people, and sometimes you hear the conversation saying, well, the capital region only has. That's somewhat misleading, because the capital region was defined when the governor was talking about the reopening plan back in the spring. We had the capital region, and there were regions that were designated all throughout the state, but the capital region was a multi-county region. It involved Albany County, Rensselaer County, Columbia, Greene, Saratoga. So it was an extensive area. This is not that. So to say, well, the capital region is, X percentage, and it might seem really low, is misleading, because it's not relevant when we're talking about assigning zones as yellow or orange or red. So to be clear here, there's a tier 1. Now, tier 1 would be the city of Albany. That's defined as any geographic area that's located within a county of 900,000 people or more, or located within a city of 90,000 or more people. So Albany's population is nearly 100,000. So that qualifies that the city itself as a tier 1 entity. So I just point that out because you may hear, well, about the city of Albany. And the city of Albany is a different tier. You could it's considered as a different region than Tier 2, which includes Albany County. So Albany County could be under different rules from Albany City, which I know is confusing, but that's the reason why. And so we in Albany County, and this is our region, we're a Tier 2 region. We are a geographic area located within a county of 150,000 or more people. And Tier 3 is located within a county of 50,000 or more people. Tier 4 is a county of less than 50,000 people. And there may be different requirements for entering into yellow, orange, red. It's generally, if you have fewer people in the zone, you have higher thresholds. So where Albany County might be 3% to go to orange, say a Tier 3 or Tier 4 region might be 3.5% or 4. And I think we can move on. So again, don't confuse Albany City with Albany County. City is Tier 1, county is Tier 2. And on December 4, the governor had a revision. And so these are the current target metrics for Tier 2. And so a yellow zone is a geographic area with a 7-day rolling average and a positivity above 3% for 10 days and 10 or more new daily cases per 1,000 residents on a 7-day average. So we have exceeded the 7-day rolling average. I believe we did that last weekend on Saturday, but we have not been assigned to be a yellow zone region yet. Orange is where the 7-day rolling average is above 4% for 10 days and you have 12 or more new daily cases per 100,000 residents on a 7-day average. Red is where the 7-day rolling average is above 5% for 10 days and again, 12 or more new daily cases per 100,000 residents. So these are the metrics. And I think, we have gone beyond yellow. We are in orange, but we have not been assigned, as a county, we have not been assigned a designation yet. So the testing requirements, new testing requirements were announced on December 4th. That was Friday. And essentially, basically schools should ensure that we have the opportunity or provide the opportunity to test on school grounds or support and accept test results from other healthcare providers. So if we do not hold a testing event or provide testing on grounds, test results provided to the school must be received within 7 days from the date of testing, and testing must be after the date that the geographic area was located, was designated a yellow or an orange or a red zone. So it is a little curious here when I go through the testing requirements in each of the zones. So I've not been able to get a clear, I think when I talk people who know, who are experts in the area, they are a little confounded by what seems to be somewhat illogical. But in a yellow zone, you have a biweekly testing requirement of 20% of the in-person population. Now remember, yellow is the lowest threshold. It's when a region gets assigned to sort of a cautionary zone. It applies immediately, and the school could test out, if you will, of this biweekly requirement if the positivity rate is lower than the region. So you have 2 weeks to do it, basically, or 10 school days. If you conduct your test and you fall below the regional rate, you do not have to test again. If you're above the regional rate, you continue to test, however. So those are the yellow zone requirements. And please remember, we are not in an assigned zone yet. In the orange zone, and this is where it gets curious. So again, we are required to test 20% of the in-person students. So it's the same number. We can do that over 1 month now, though not 2 weeks. And we need to do do it proportionally. We can't just say, oh, let's get it over. Let's do it over 2 days. Let's test everybody with the whole 20% and we're done with it. The requirement is that the 10% is the maximum or the minimum to be tested biweekly. Schools in a red zone, and that would be, okay, the actual cluster. Remember, orange is sort of a sea of orange around a red. So that's the actual intense cluster. It can be very, very granular in its assignment. The percentage of individuals goes up to 30%, and that would be in-person faculty and students, faculty, and staff. And again, the requirement is over 1 month with the same proportionality requirements, except for now it being 30%, you have to do 15% of the maximum minimum biweekly. Now, if the random sampling generates 9 or more positive test cases in any school, or for a sample size of more than 300 weekly tests, there's a positivity rate of 3% or higher, then the school would be required to close at that time under the current regulations. And again, I'd also like to throw in the caveat that these are constantly under review, so I am giving you the most up-to-date and current information on this. So what you have before you is an MOU with the Albany County Department of Health. I went ahead and signed this agreement because at that time I felt time was of the essence. And certainly if the board chooses to not enter into this agreement, that is their prerogative. That is their prerogative. However, one of the issues here would be then we would have to become our own testing site, and that has a minimal expense associated with it, and there are many advantages here to collaborating with the county. So we would be something called an LSL, a limited service laboratory. The county, Dr. Whalen is an MD. She would exercise oversight as the laboratory director, and we would be able to do rapid nasal swab testing on school property. That would allow us to do it, and we have ordered, and today we received 3,200 rapid tests at no cost from the New York State Department of Health. So these have been provided to us, and we do have 3,200 on site. So the plan would be that if we did do a rapid test, it would require 4 people. 4 people, there would be a greeter to check in the individual, a person to perform the actual test. School nurses can perform the testing once they're trained. A person to process the test, that takes 15 minutes, and a person to record the results and inform the families. So we would do our own work. I know Matt Stein, who supervises our nurses, has been working with Jenna Bongermino, has been working to also with an agency called Nurse Corps. It's our preference here to not have our nurses do the direct testing, but certainly to be in the buildings to help provide support. But to have the building nurse in the building to provide support to do their job as the building nurse, and that LabCorp and perhaps one of our substitute school nurses would be performing the test. There is a timekeeper when we have the third bullet there, a person to process the test. The test has to be processed, needs to, if you will, I'll use the word percolate for 15 minutes to get an accurate result. So you would need, that person would have the responsibility of, as the samples came in, identifying them, putting a stopwatch on them, and letting them do the 15 minutes. Now, one estimate we heard was that 40 tests per hour could be processed. I think that's extremely optimistic. We would probably take much longer than that to do that. But essentially, this is what the human power that would be required to do the rapid test. And so that MOU If the board chooses to accept that this evening, we would be set up. We would be ready to operate as an LSL. And we could, once we receive consent from our families, we would be able to select a random sampling of 20% of the students and staff who are on site to receive the rapid test according to the parameters decided for yellow, orange, or red. So to review our planning thus far, so we're also exploring a partnership with SUNY Albany through Capital Region BOCES. And this would allow us to use SUNY pool testing protocol. That's a very good test. It's a very accurate test. Essentially, BOCES would do the administration of that. They would take that over. It would be done, of course, for a fee. But if we did go to the saliva pool testing, that would, and that's what the saliva test is, what pool testing involves. It would allow us to test large numbers of people who don't have COVID-19 symptoms. They're asymptomatic. Give us a better understanding of how many people in total, not just those who have been diagnosed, have the virus. So again, pool testing involves collecting saliva samples. They're grouped into pools of about 5. They're sent to the SUNY lab, and then they determine whether the pool is positive for the virus. Those samples are anonymous. They're logged with an ID number. Only the district health office would know to whom the sample belongs. And as a result, the way it would work is if that pool of 5 tests positive, then we would know that at least one of the individuals in the group has the virus. We would then be contacted with the ID numbers from that particular pool of 5 that tested positive, and we would follow with instructions for follow-up testing. And the follow-up testing could include using the rapid test, one of the 3,200 samples that we did receive through the New York State Department of Health. Those, if the pool comes up negative, they don't have to do anything further. Okay, everyone in the pool would have to be negative for the pool to be negative. So the cost of the BOCES program, by the way, is about $25 per test. So we would have to test about 1,000 people. That's a total of $25,000 approximately, but we would receive aid on that next year. If, in fact, the expense-based aids are still being granted the way they've always been granted by the state. And I must say that that could be in question, but then the net cost to us would be about $12,500. Now, I mentioned earlier here that survey for families is necessary for us to gain consent for testing. We have to have consent to test anyone. We cannot compel anyone, a student or employee, to test. When the survey comes out, we will explain that it could be either the rapid nasal test or the pooled saliva test. In any case, we will send this out. We'll have a letter that will explain the process, and we're developing a video to talk about this. So I think what families would be asked to do is they would give their consent to testing, and they would know that it could either be the rapid nasal test or the pooled saliva test. So what does testing mean in terms of numbers? Well, right now, in terms of the in-person population, this is what we report to the dashboard. Blue Creek is 46. That would be 46 tests. And, you can see it right down there, Bout Hill's at 56. It gets challenging at the junior high school where we would have to perform 215 tests, or at Shaker High School where we would have to perform 475 tests. Any questions on where we are with testing, or, and I provide this as background to the MOU.
Joe, it's Sandy. In terms of cost, since you have to include staff, faculty and staff in the testing, wouldn't our health insurance cover the cost for the test?
Sandy, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if anybody on the call does. Are you talking about, I'm not sure I understand. Can you give me a little more information on that?
No, I thought insurers were covering, or in some cases, were covering the cost of the test.
Covering individuals, you mean?
Yeah, for the staff who, and even some families who have health insurance.
We have to provide it cost-free whether an individual has insurance or not. So we have to test for free, and any costs are costs that we decide to accrue for that. So if we decide to hire through Nurse Corps, that would be a cost that we could accrue.
And the manpower or person power you need to the 4-person team to do the testing, you'd need that in every building, right?
Yeah, what we would do is we would probably have a couple of teams, and the teams would travel from building to building. And where, a better way of phrasing that, there would be a couple of teams that would involve perhaps the person doing the testing, the actual testing, a person doing data entry. There would also be some assistance on site, but I think, the core team would be a traveling unit.
Okay.
That's our additional thinking, or initial thinking on that.
All right, thank you.
So I just wanted to clarify, just so we're all on the same page. So as soon as we get designated either yellow or orange, hopefully
Yes.
not red, that's when we will have to start doing this testing protocol. Is that right?
That's when the clock starts ticking. Yes, Michelle.
Okay.
Assuming we're in person, because you only have to test people in person. So if that
Yeah,
happens
which is
in the next 2 days,
which is an interesting dynamic right now, right? That's a good point, Ms. Gills.
Yeah. So then we'd actually, but it would give us some time. Like if we get into the orange zone, in the next few days, it would give us some time to kind of scramble and get this whole protocol rolling and sort of figure out how it's all going to work, right?
Yeah, we've done a lot of thinking on it already, so we don't have to scramble too much. I think the only thing that we would have to do is we would have to get the consent form out and get consent back.
Okay.
And so far we haven't seen any indication on the part of the health department of the state that we are being pushed into yellow or orange. I think they're still trying to figure the metric out. And I'm sorry, Michelle, you were about to say something else.
No. And all the districts are doing the same thing, correct?
All the districts are absolutely, all the districts are gearing up for testing. Some may be pursuing the saliva test only. Many, probably a little few more right now, are going down with the rapid test, the nasal swab test, and some are thinking about a hybrid. In other words, maybe the initial test is done through BOCEs. It certainly simplifies the process. You get that done if you're successful, and successful is defined by being below the regional rate and not ending up in any more testing, then that's good. But hypothetically, okay, and Ms. Gills, please correct me if I'm wrong, we could enter into yellow, complete the testing there and be okay, then enter into orange and be assigned a new testing requirement, complete it there and be fine, and then go into red. So you could be testing multiple times. So I think, given that scenario, paying $25,000 a shot is expensive to repeatedly do that, even with the aid. And we are very fortunate. We were out in front, and we have, we are well stocked hypothetically to do 3 rounds of rapid testing if we need to do it.
So I just have one more question.
Sure.
When those 3,200 free rapid tests run out, then do we have to
that would run us about three test trials.
Right. And then would we start having to pay for those, or who pays for that at that point?
Well, our initial order, and Kathy, correct me if we're wrong on this, our initial order was for 5,000 and they shipped us 3,200 in the batch. We have probably the most on call, if you will, or in stock of any school in the region, as far as I know, in terms of who I've talked to among my colleagues. So we're in good shape with tests.
It's part of the model from the federal government that the state had to provide through the local counties these tests for free. So we have more tests than Walgreens and CVS combined right now. So we're ready. We are ready to go. And a big piece of the puzzle will be having to get 20%, which means you have to get parents to consent. So it's not the very invasive nasal test. It's the one that's just, a small Q-tip kind of thing. Will that be, will we get to 20% of our parents saying, yeah, you can do that at school for my kid? Would the saliva test be more acceptable to people? Does that seem less invasive? Would they be more open to that? So we just don't know. We know that our colleagues out in Western New York have really had to put on a campaign. Now, these getting to 20% testing and getting that rate lower than the area keeps your schools open. So for example, like out in Western New York, East New York, they were going into closures. Parents want their kids in school. So they didn't have 20% at first until they really kind of almost did a campaign to say, if you want school to stay open, we need some of you to step up. So it takes some work to get that part done, as well as with your faculty and staff. And so we have both. We know that when we're going to do the permission, we're probably going to ask them to give permission for both models. The big difference is obviously, as Joe said, the BOCES cost, which is paying for their team to come in. They do everything once they come in though. So we have to basically get the kids from the classroom to wherever the testing is happening. Then their team takes over, takes the samples, gets them to the labs, sends us the results, and it cuts out all that 4-person team that we were talking about for the nasal tests. But it comes at a perhaps a much greater cost depending on how many teams we need from Nurse Corps. But our thought was that 4-person team would set up, would go to a building. We would let parents know this week, this is the day of the test. Your child has been selected, so that they would know 48 hours in advance. The principal would have a sheet, make the appointments. Team would show up a half an hour in advance. We'd use either a cafeteria space or a library space that's not being used, and have the model set up, somebody from the building to check them in because they know the kids, and especially the 5-year-old, we want to make sure we have the right child. And then the testing area that has to be sequestered, the space for the test to be processed, and then this space for results to come out. Obviously, the other big piece of this is if you do the nasal test, you could detect a positive in the moment. So at that point, every protocol we're currently using, we've got a 3rd grade positive, suddenly we've got to send home that 3rd grade class. Or it's our 3rd grade teacher. Now we have to send her home and find somebody to teach her class. So there are things to be figured out where the pool sample, you don't get the results right away. So you don't incur that kind of logistical challenge.
And Scott, you were mentioning, we mentioned Western New York. Scott, you mentioned that from some of the people you've talked out in Western, that there was a very high participation in terms of agreeing to participate in the testing program. Was it about 90 or 92, 93%?
Yes, it was another Rochester suburban district, Brighton, and they had well into the 90s in their participation and how they proceeded with doing testing in a drive-through mode over a 3-day period. They did 3,310 tests.
Would it be possible, and but to like create a video for the parents to see the whole process in order to help them become more familiar and comfortable with, the from the greeter to the testing to the waiting, that, and watching doing a video of someone getting a test. Maybe an adult would sign off on that or something, but just so that the parents have a visual of how that's all going to work. Because I know, if your kid is 5 or 6 years old, you're going to be a little apprehensive about putting them through that without you being there.
So the company that does the nasal test does have a really good video on what the process of getting tests looked like. And we've created a Google form that we'll use to get parent permission. And we've also created a letter talking about what this whole thing is. And then what we haven't done, but it's in our queue to do, is to make a video about that. But we could certainly embed the link, because their video is really good. It's short, but it's good, and you get a real sense of it. That's a great idea, Michelle. I didn't think about that, to embed it in the letter so people can see what they're giving permission for.
I have a question about cost, and maybe I missed this when you were going through it, but so the 3,200 rapid tests we have from New York State at no cost to us. Is there a cost that we're going to incur to administer those? Is the 3,200 just the materials, but we need to provide the personnel?
Yes, we have to provide the personnel. So the cost would be, the use of our personnel, if we decided to hire additional personnel.
Okay.
So, for example, there is an agency called Nurse Corps.
Right.
We are really inclined to use Nurse Corps so that we can keep our nurses in place.
Do we have
in the elementary school.
a ballpark figure for what that cost would be?
I don't know, Mr. Stein, you're on the call right now. Do you have a sense of what the cost of the Nurse Corps?
Yeah,
per diem basis?
Yeah, Nurse Corps, and it depends on, how many hours a day, but I believe Nurse Corps is somewhere between $100 to $120 an hour. And if it's for a full day, it can be a little bit less than that. And the Nurse Corps nurses that we have met with already that we would be able to use are experienced in rapid testing as well. We've met with them to gain more knowledge about the process. And they've gone into, up to this point, they haven't been into schools yet, but they've gone into private businesses and set up rapid testing. So they've taken us through that process a little bit, things to expect. So essentially what we would like to do is utilize those nurses to actually administer the rapid test. And then our staff is more the support staff that's surrounding the process, greeting the kids, comfortable faces that they're going to see as they come in, or even using our nurses that are reading the results. But the actual experienced nurses from Nurse Corps would do the administering.
So do we have a concept? We talked about 3,200 gives us roughly 3 rounds of testing. Do we have and we know that through BOCES, a round of testing is going to cost us $25,000 up front, about half of which we may get back. Do we have a concept of how much it's going to cost us to do a round of testing with the rapid tests?
I would say in ballparking it, just in the Nurse Corps expenses alone, it could be it could be very close to the cost of the net cost of BOCES. So it could be around $12,000.
Okay. So we're not looking at, we get the advantage of having the rapid return, but we're not looking at a huge cost savings by going with the rapid test over the SUNY through BOCES.
Probably not so much at the end of the day.
At the end of the day. Right. Okay. And then the number of students we have to test is contingent on, and I'm looking at the slide here for what we're going to talk about next, but the more students we have remote, the smaller the number of students we need to test to hit that 20%.
Correct.
Okay.
Sam, it's only the on-site students.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Or hybrid students.
Correct.
So
anyone who shows up on campus, right? Oh, so that's a good question too. And this may be from Mr. Stein. If we have a student who's involved in sports, but they're a fully remote student, but now they're showing up on campus to participate in practice, where do they fall? Do we know?
As far as testing goes, I do not know. I haven't seen that actual language addressed anywhere.
Okay.
Because technically speaking, from an instructional standpoint, they are a fully remote student.
Right.
But you're right, they are taking advantage of our programming. That's a great question.
I mean,
I would have to get an answer.
I can't imagine we're talking about more than a couple of dozen students that fall into that category.
And right now there's so few sports with the low and moderates that there's really not going to be a lot of kids actually participating either.
Sam, I think the basis for determining who's on campus would be the students we report in the New York State dashboard. So those students would be reported as remote in the New York State dashboard. And quite honestly, the issue has not been addressed in any guidance that we've received. So I think what we would do is what we are using right now is for the students who are listed as coming on campus sometime for their schooling is what we have on the basis of the New York State dashboard.
Okay.
Joe, I would just say, although it hasn't been explicitly stated in the guidance, when you report on the dashboard, that in-person number is meant to contain any students who come onto campus that day, even if it is from sporting events. So those numbers that are on that chart were derived from like our dashboard from 2 weeks ago when we didn't have any sports players. But if we get into the spring, there's the spring sports season, the dashboard numbers go up, and that the 20% aligns to the dashboard number.
And we do have students who are in remote and who choose to participate in athletics. I mean, it's not hundreds, it's very few, but we do have students.
Yeah, and just jumping back to one, I want to look up some numbers because I had crunched some numbers today, and we one of our plans factored using 2 nurses from Nurse Corps. They have 2 to 3 that are experienced in rapid testing, and we figured with 2 nurses that are testing, so essentially 2 teams that for 1,000 tests, we figured about 30 tests an hour. That's 15 tests per nurse, which is very conservative. It could be more than that. That it'd be about 34 hours total of testing, which at $200 an hour, 100 for each nurse would still be about half the cost, if not more than going with the BOCES program. So, but again, those are ballpark figures.
Sure. Okay. And we have a very limited supply of those rapid tests anyway. Right. And no indication that we should expect more.
No, we can't expect more. They sent us our first shipment of them, and then we just alert them. So we have more tests to come.
Okay.
And we actually put our request was more than that, wasn't it? It was our first request was for 5,000, I believe, wasn't it?
No, she moved us up to 3,200 because they didn't send a 3-month shipment initially.
Okay.
But we could rely on the rapid tests sort of indefinitely as the requirement stands.
Definitely. Yep.
If that's the way we go. Okay.
Yes.
Do you think there will be a problem getting parents, 20% of the parents to consent?
I don't think so.
I don't either, because my thinking is the parents who have chosen in person really want their kids in school. Yeah. So they have a very vested interest in getting the 20%.
Mm-hmm.
I think there'd be pretty strong participation.
Okay.
But I do think it's going to take a lot of explanation because, I mean, if you're not paying attention to this and the governor has said it 7 different ways.
Yeah, right.
I think your average parent out there doesn't even know this is in the pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Just one additional piece of information here. The survey was completed last Friday for people making the request to move to either from in-person to remote or from remote to in-person. And so these are the survey results. And it's very interesting. You can see them there in light of the surge. In the K3 program, 4 wanted to move to remote, 45 wanted to come back in person, 37 need transportation. In the 4-6 program, 15 wanted to go to remote, 27 wanted to come back in person, 24 students need transportation. The 7-8 program, 15 want to change to remote, 26 want to change to in-person, 26 need transportation. And in the 912 program, 43 requests to go to remote, 51 to come back in person, 32 students need transportation. So 70 students, 7 students want to go into the remote. 149 want to come out of remote to go to in-person. So roughly a 2-to-1 ratio in favor of coming back in person. And of those, 119 students will now require transportation. And Denise Town has that information and she's working through that as well. I just thought we'd update you on that. And so we can leave the screen share right now. And are there any other questions or just discussion on this? And, if not, if the board feels comfortable, we certainly would welcome a vote on the MOU.
Okay, thanks to Matt and Jenna for their efforts in terms of developing this COVID testing policy. And of course, thanks to Mr. Kaur and Ms. Skills for being tireless when it comes to all things COVID and keeping our students healthy and our families healthy too. So I'd like a motion to approve the MOU between Albany County and the North Colonies Central School District. Mrs. Pangburn. Mrs. Pangburn, she in here?
Sorry, I couldn't find my mouse. I couldn't get off of mute. I'll move to approve the MOU with Albany County.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Vondell?
Oh, I'll second it.
All right. And all in favor? Let's see those hands. And thank you all. Thank you for that. And do you have anything else? I don't have anything else. I don't think any of us. Okay, great.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
With the numbers coming back to school exceeding the numbers going away from school, do we have staffing adequate to handle that?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
That's all. That's all we need to know. That's all we need to know.
Now we have work to do. Yes.
Yeah.
Brian is working on that already. It obviously impacts our K-3 grades, so we may have some transition of staff from remote back to in-person. And Denise is going to have a big job because so many of the people who are coming in now need transportation, which may mean redoing her routes. So hence why we asked for it so early, so we would have time to work on it. The upper grades, the high school and junior high school are almost a wash, and it's enough of a trade-off that will be fine. But it's really, it's acute at K-3. And oddly, we got like a ton of kindergarten entrants this week, so it's really acute at K. Just saying.
So thank you again to Denise and her team, Amy and Claudine, who are doing unbelievably great work for us, and Brian as well. Thank you, Brian. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Ms. Grinnell, and a second. Mr. Cannon, all in favor? All right, thank you very much. Good to see everyone. Be safe and happy and healthy.
Stay safe and well.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for your hard work.
Everybody,
Yeah, bye,
Thank
everybody.
you, everyone.
Night.
have a good evening.
Yeah,
Night.
night. Thanks again.